Why do we sometimes freeze in the grocery aisle, staring at a wall of almost identical cereals, feeling like the simple act of picking breakfast has turned into an existential crisis? What's happening when we spend hours weighing the pros and cons of a new job offer, or second-guess a decision we already made? The way we make decisions, everyday ones and those that change our lives, reveals the complex and sometimes mysterious machinery of the human mind. Let's crack open the psychology of decision-making. It's easy to imagine we approach every choice armed with pure logic, weighing each option coolly, guided by reason alone. But is the story really that simple? Or does something deeper, less obvious, tip the scales before we're even aware a scale exists? In the words of the poet Robert Frost, "Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference." These familiar lines from The Road Not Taken bring us face to face with one of the temptations of decision-making. The idea that every choice carves a path into our destiny, splitting off from what could have been. Standing at a fork in the road, we imagine that some secret wisdom might help us pick right. But is choosing really about clear signposts and perfect foresight? Psychologists have found that our brains rely on shortcuts, what researchers call heuristics, to make decisions more manageable. Consider a classic example from daily life. You're hungry, and there are 10 restaurants on the block. Instead of carefully ranking every menu, price, and Yelp review, your brain narrows the options. Maybe you go for what you remember was good last time, or you default to something familiar. This mental shortcut saves energy and time, but it sometimes means we overlook potentially better choices. In his Meditations, the Roman philosopher Marcus Aurelius mused, "Our life is what our thoughts make it." When we reflect on a decision, we're not just processing external information, what's on the menu, or who's joining us, but surfacing our moods, memories, and personal values. If yesterday's lunch made you sick, that memory can outweigh all logical arguments. When we say we just feel like pizza, emotion is already steering the wheel. The famous psychologist Daniel Kahneman talks about two systems in our heads. One, fast and intuitive, and the other, slow and rational. Most of the time, we act on instant feelings, snap judgments about whether something is safe, attractive, or threatening. Only when we hit a snag do we slow down and analyze. Let's connect this to a passage from Hamlet's famous soliloquy. To be, or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. Hamlet's dilemma isn't about logic. It's about wrestling with uncertainty and fear. The sea of troubles he imagines is the psychological weight every big decision brings. What will I lose? What pain might I feel? What if things go wrong? This is sometimes called loss aversion. The idea that we're more motivated to avoid loss than to pursue gain. We're drawn powerfully toward the option that feels safest, even if the odds favor a bigger reward elsewhere. Another powerful force is something called confirmation bias. We tend to seek out information that supports what we already want to believe, sometimes ignoring evidence to the contrary. A philosopher, Pascal, once wrote, "We are more often persuaded by the reasons we ourselves discover than by those which come into the mind of others." In other words, our own hunches and arguments stick, while outside advice slides right off. This is why it's so easy to convince ourselves after the fact that we always knew we were right, or to refuse to change our minds when new information comes. But sometimes we go a step further and let the crowd decide for us. Social proof, like seeing what most people do, can nudge us toward decisions we wouldn't make alone. As the poet Dante described in the Divine Comedy, the darkest places in hell are reserved for those who maintain their neutrality in times of moral crisis. Even while we want to choose for ourselves, the pressure to follow a crowd or avoid taking a stand can be overwhelming, especially when the stakes are high. So how does all of this fit together? Think of the brain as a decision factory, juggling speed and accuracy, balancing instinct and analysis, emotion and logic. But unlike a real assembly line, the process isn't always smooth. Even a simple choice can feel like Hamlet's sea of troubles, or Frost's lonely road through the yellow wood. Distraction adds another layer. In modern life, most choices aren't made in quiet meditation, but in the chaos of everyday noise. Philosopher Mary Oliver captured the challenge this way in her poem, The Journey. One day you finally knew what you had to do, and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice. Despite the crowd of distractions, sometimes we have to step boldly forward, trusting that clarity comes in motion, not before. Procrastination, after all, is just decision-making delayed, often because we fear making the wrong move or because too many voices compete for our attention. Once we do act, another psychological quirk appears: post-decision rationalization. We edit the backstory to make our decision seem inevitable. We've all bought something expensive, only to search online later for reviews to justify the splurge, even though the purchase is already made. Shakespeare's Macbeth captures this instinct perfectly. Things bad begun make strong themselves by ill. Having chosen, we double down, rationalizing so the discomfort of uncertainty fades, at least for a while. But sometimes, regret seeps in. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." Looking back, we replay what-ifs and second guesses. Did I take the right path? Each reflection can tinge our memory of the choice, sometimes sweetening it, sometimes souring it. This feedback changes how we make decisions the next time around. Regret and satisfaction both serve as teachers, shaping how we weigh risks and rewards. So is there any way to get better at making decisions? One clue comes from another poem, Rudyard Kipling's If. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. Calm and perspective help, but so does practice. The more we weather tough choices, the more comfortable we become with uncertainty. Sometimes breaking big decisions into smaller steps reduces fear. Flipping from, "Must I take this job?" to, "Can I try this for 6 months and see how it feels?" Each small move lowers the stakes and adds new information, building our confidence in the process. Of course, machines make decisions too, but their process is different. Algorithms can crunch thousands of possibilities, but they don't feel fear, hope, or regret. What makes human decisions uniquely human is emotion. The way memories, hunches, and personal stories color every moment. It's not just about picking the right cereal or career. It's a constant negotiation between our heads and our hearts. In sum, the psychology of decision-making is less a straight line and more a winding path, scattered with shortcuts, roadblocks, and signposts only visible in hindsight. For every fork in the road, we balance logic and intuition, comfort and risk, the advice of others and the dialogue inside our own minds. The goal isn't perfect foresight, but rather growing comfortable with ambiguity, learning that every decision is, in a way, both an answer and the start of a new question. So the next time you stall in the cereal aisle, or stay up late agonizing over life choices, remember, this is your mind at work, trying its best to keep you safe, happy, and moving forward. Maybe the only certainty is this: it's not about never making mistakes, but about making peace with the fact that uncertainty is built in. After all, as the poet Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote, be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves. Decision-making, then, is less about getting it right, and more about learning from what comes next.